Just to correct you really quick, Matthew White, I don't want the association with Matthew Hyde there.
No, my apologies.
I will say, first off, I am really irate at some of the things that both parties said, specifically in reference to the BPO sector. I am really irate about what both parties said, specifically in relation to beach access. But I needed to open with that because of how upset I am. Apart from that, I think what we saw from both parties was the opportunity for them to expand on what their campaign platforms have been. For the PNP, that was, as I said at the beginning, a massive social platform. And for the JLP, kind of proving that what has worked before for this past 9 years will work for another term. And we'll get into later about how effective either party was at doing that.
Was the debate engaging enough for you, Sunil?
It was, whether it was engaging enough, it was engaging, but I'd say that the debate had a lot of preludes to the responses that I think could have been much more, could have been shorter. I felt like the responses needed to be much more direct. And if that were done, I would have been more pleased in terms of that question. But there was just too much fluff, I think, in a lot of the responses from both sides.
Did it resonate with you, Christoph Simpson? The debate overall?
The debate overall, on some things where they touched on specifics, I'd say, okay, yes, they're talking a good talk. As to whether they would actually do the things they're committed to do, solving the problems they're committed to solving. I don't know how much confidence I have in that. A lot of it, though, did include, as Sunil said, there was a lot of fluff, there are a lot of jabs talking about who did this, who did that. I still don't get a clear sense of what to expect from the parties going forward, outside of some specific things, but generally, we didn't get any proper, as Matthew said, we didn't get any proper answers on the question on the BPO sector and what labor relations would look like under either party.
Corv da Costa.
In terms of?
Your overall thoughts on the debate first.
I thought it was an excellent debate in terms of covering social issues. I thought the journalists were prepared or covered the ground in terms of the different issues. I thought the teams represented their political parties well. I think one was more prepared and the other struggled to really enter the race.
You preempted my next question there in terms of the journalists being prepared. What did you think of the questions throughout the debate? Sticking with you, Corv da Costa.
I loved the interaction of the journalists on the panel, plus the social media interaction. I thought bringing people in Jamaica into the space was very critical to democracy, but also played out in a very good way. The questions that came from social media were spot on, and I feel that's what people in the streets are really concerned about. I feel the questions couldn't have been better. I feel the responses needed a little bit more substance and meat sometimes, but I feel the journalists represented themselves well.
So we had issues of health, housing, transportation, human rights, salary, beach access, technological access, data protection. All those issues were raised throughout several questions. There was a new part to the debate, Matthew, about allowing each team to ask each other a question. What do you think of the inclusion of that unprecedented move by the Jamaica Debates Commission?
It was a very good move. And if I can be specific and a little bit curt for you here, I can say it worked for the PNP. It did not work for the JLP. The question that the JLP asked was answered very simply by saying no new taxes. There's absolutely nothing the Labour Party could have done to force the PNP to say, I'm going to implement new taxes. And as a matter of fact, they did not. And in the closing statement, Charles Jr., Colonel Charles Jr. would have mentioned that they said there's going to be new taxes. No, they did not. No, they did not. And for the PNP, it proved to them once again, or the platform that they've been standing on for a long time, which is that the government can never give a sober response to questions. And this is not an indictment on the government or saying that there's conclusive wrongdoing. It's just that always, when questions are asked of the government, the response is never sober. and it causes unsurety, it causes persons to worry, and that was just broadcasted on a national stage.
That new element for you, Christophe, did it work? Allowing the teams to ask each other questions at the end.
I mean, I think it is a good inclusion. What I had been saying earlier in the pre-debate show was that the value that we get from the debates rather than the manifestos, because you can read the manifestos, or the JLP has released something before the manifesto, which is a track record of what they're claiming to be their achievements. Those are substantive documents. So if you come to a platform, you can easily just preach from what you have prepared already. But the point of the debate is that you have two things. You have questions you may not be prepared for, and then you have the other party intervening or rebutting while you're trying to deliver your point. So the partner with each side asking the other a question adds to that element, the value of a debate that separates it from just having a party telling you what it wanted to hear.
So here we go then into some individual assessments, starting with you, Sunil. What did you make of each of the debaters in terms of their performances individually?
I think that on the opposition side, I think that the team members had more synergy. I think that they were more prepared. I think that Mr. Crawford, as I predicted, would have had a good mix of drama and...
Just to be clear, as you predicted to yourself, because you didn't call any names before.
Yes, you had asked, but I was referring to him.
She said she was going to say who.
Right? I think he had a good balance of what the debate needed, because it does need that, right?
Which
in
is
terms of the drama. I think it does need the jabs, the appropriate jabs that he made. I think Raymond Crawford also... Raymond Price also had a good balance of that, and he had very direct, appropriate questions. I think that his rebuttals were also very appropriate. And I think Senator Binns was a good balance of both of what Damian and Raymond brought. I think that on the government side, that I sense a little bit of uneasiness from all three of them. I sense that they weren't as prepared to answer some of the questions that were asked. I think possibly that they would have needed a little bit more preparation in terms of whether the last part that was, the new part that was added. I think it's a good idea. I think what it does is to help...
You haven't answered both the individuals when you gave individual assessments for the PNP. I want an individual assessment for the JLP as well.
I think Matthew Samuda, I would just sum all of them up as the same. I think that they all needed to be much more prepared. And I think the preparation kind of impacted the confidence that they exuded through the screen in terms of what their responses were. I don't think they were confident in some of their responses, and I think that they gave a lot of broad brush responses. All three of them, I would sum them up all the same.
Corv da Costa, individual assessment from you?
I feel on the JLP side, I think tonight they really struggled to communicate what they are prepared to do for the next term if they win at the poll. And I think because their manifesto was late, I don't think their party is used to talking about the future. And so they reference the 9 years and what happened in the past, but elections are about the future. And I think Pernell Charles struggled tonight. I think his best moment came in the closing statement that was convincing enough. I don't know if people will believe it. I think I was almost disappointed with Kamina tonight. I think she's always sharp. I think she struggled with some of the responses tonight, and I feel Samuda held their team together for the most part when he was responding. I think for the PNP, it was a relay in some ways. They were referencing each other's names. There was a little bit of synergy, more chemistry, more teamwork. It's a team debate, and I think Team PNP represented the team effort in responding to the questions. I thought Damian, in the pre-show, I said if Damian stuck to the substance, and he did stick to the substance. He alluded to commenting on the platform, but he will have that moment. I feel Raymond had those jobs, and I think his role on the team was to have those jobs. And in the earliest response coming off of Charles Jr., he initially just blew Charles out the water. And I feel Senator Fraser Binns, I feel she was the best debater for Team PNP, because every time she responded to a question, I put my marketing hat on. I feel she was speaking directly to an audience who was approachable, who's maybe listening to this or watching this in a rum bar or somewhere. I feel the common man understood, especially the beach access. 10 out of 10 on that response.
Yeah, Corv mentioned the jobs, Matthew. We saw jobs from both sides. What did you make of that in the debate, to bring it to life, to borrow Sunil's words?
I thought the jabs at certain points in time really didn't do much for the person making them.
Specific examples.
I'll make the example firstly of Matthew Samudo. When the 300% increase was mentioned as a question, instead of answering the question, the only thing the JLP could have done was to restructure it and talk about how the opposition didn't give good enough opposition to it, and talk about their party leader, etc., etc. And then there were many, many times where either Damian Crawford or Raymond Price would begin their answer with a jab at the JLP, and it didn't give them much substance. I'm not really upset at those instances, but in terms of getting to efficient answers quickly, it really delayed that. Yeah. But I think Christoph might have something more to say on that.
All right, for you, Christoph, what was the high point of this debate?
I don't know if I can identify one particular high point. I think
high points. Yeah.
High points. Well, even then, there's difficulty, because one, to pay attention to even the beach access, they're making contradicting claims. So the PNP says something, JLP says, oh, well, that's not true. And this came up more than once. So they make contradicting claims. Where do we stand in being able to verify who is telling the truth? And are people, general public, are they going to be able to find this information easily, or will they lean to one side or another based on who they trust more? That was a challenge in following some parts of this. The beach access is where I remember it being like at the forefront, and then the other thing in the end about the no new taxes, that's another point that they make contradicting claims, in sense of JLP saying, well, the PNP is saying they wanted the new taxes, and PNP is denying that in a way. It made things a little confusing to follow, because they're outright contradicting each other in saying what happened or what didn't happen.
For you, Sini, what was the low point in the debate? A low point for you?
I think the low point in the debate for me was around the question of corruption. And regarding the Prime Minister, I think that it is so unproductive and uninspiring that whenever the question of corruption is raised, the answer is always premised on the other side do it, or the other side have done it too, and not what our approach is to mitigate corruption. It's never that. Yeah. That was the lowest point for me.
Christoph, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I want to talk about the low point for me, because I did identify a low point while struggling to identify a high point. It was the question on the BPO and working conditions. I wasn't satisfied by other parties' response. I think they were less concerned with working conditions and more concerned with appeasing the BPO sector itself.
I see Matthew shaking his head, and I also see Corv shaking his head. It means they both agree that that was the low point. Well, when we come back, we want to hear who were the best debaters, who were the worst debaters, and which team won. Stick and stay with us here on CVM TV. It's our post-debate analysis of the first of three. That first debate is what we'll be going to momentarily. But first, 3 of my 4 panelists said that the BPO question, or the answer to the BPO question, was for them a low point in the debate, the lowest point perhaps. Let's replay that question and the answers, and then we'll get some comments on that.
In 2022, the Jamaica Observer exposed the harsh exploitative conditions under which many call center workers work. If elected, what will you do to fix the issues to fix these issues that contradict labor laws in the BPO sector?
You know, the start of that question is an acknowledgement that the provision of modern access to technology, including the internet, including broadband, including fiber optics, began with the liberalization of the telecommunications sector when Philip Powell was the minister with responsibility. My opponents opposite seem to be having an issue putting the correct time frame to the responses. In other words, a seeming disconnect with reality. With respect to the BPO sector, one of the most recent industries facilitated by the technological advancement, there are serious concerns with respect to conditions of work, pay, time off, even sick leave, things that the Jamaican workplace has considered for many years to be a right. These BPO operators, the contractors, are not necessarily from the Jamaican space. So more integration has to be done so that they understand what our labor laws are and what the members of the Jamaican workforce have come to expect, including things such as maternity leave with pay and equal work for women. In the PNP administration led by Mark Golding, we will begin that education process, that integration process, and allow our partners in the BPO to understand.
Thank you so much.
The BPO sector, like the tourism sector, is offering a significant opportunity for many of our entry-level youngsters to have good jobs, jobs that will allow them to be able to get not just revenue but work experience. And it's important to know that the government not only sees the expansion in the BPO sector, but through the inspectorate at the Ministry of Labour, we ensure to speak to employers and employees and to monitor, to make sure that where there are any abuses, we take the necessary steps immediately, whether it is to carry them to court or whether it is to bring to constructive social dialogue.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Matthew White, you were outraged during the debate when we were inside here watching together. What was wrong with the responses for you?
I'll begin with the People's National Party because their platform is social. Yes? First of all, it is indefensible for Mr. Price to have begun with a victory upon the last question. This is a very important issue for him to be taking time to talk about something else. Secondly, as a party that claims to be doing or wanting to do better for people, how could you admit that these are human rights abuses? How could you admit that these people are being exploited, being paid dirt low wages, and you're going to say the response to that is to have re-education and to collaborate with them? That's not a response to human rights abuses. How can you as a party on the JLP side talk about wanting to do more for the people and your response to human rights abuses is to have a constructive social dialogue? That's outrageous. No, that's indefensible, Giovanni, at a base level. I was only more incensed by the idea that the mass industrialization of hotels is going to come with also beach access and persons having windows to the sea. As Matthew Simuda said, I have no clue what that means. I'm from Trelawney, and that idea about citizens having access to the beaches in the midst of this privatization and development is ridiculous.
Corvette Costa, do you agree?
I think for me, this particular question just asks for two things. It asks for the debater to exert some amount of leadership or understanding of the issues and how they will move government resources to protect workers in this sector. And I don't think they, on both sides, really communicated strong leadership and how they would protect the rights of the Jamaican worker.
Is there anything inherently wrong, though, with taking a jab at your opponents from a question before because you didn't get a chance to do it before? So take that jab before answering the question. Matthew seems to be incensed because Raymond did that. Is there something inherently wrong with that for you, Christoph?
I don't think it's appropriate. I think it takes away. Remember that they have the time management for a reason. I want to point out something with Kamina Johnson-Smith, for example. There was a question on healthcare, and she wanted to say something, and the time for that ended. When the question for healthcare came back around way later down in the debate, that is when she got her chance in. She never inserted her response to that into some other topic. But I don't think that's what Matthew is talking about, no, because when Raymond Price was doing his victory lap, in Matthew's words, on the BPO question, it wasn't in relation to something else, you know. What upset me is that it was relation to the BPO sector itself. He was talking about how basically the tech access, and remember both parties are pushing this as this tech access thing, can be credited. Basically, why BPO things are common now, that can be credited to liberalization policies under the PNP. So you're taking credit for our reliance on this thing as a source of providing jobs. I don't know if that's compatible with promoting workers' rights when we know that the BPO sector in general across the world, that's how they operate. They research which countries have the most exploitable working conditions, and then they go into those countries. It's a tricky issue to address, the BPO sector and regulating it, because the minute you start to overregulate it, they will just jump to a new market. But I think it's silly to suggest that the problem is that they don't know the labor laws in Jamaica. They know it and they know how to get around it. When you're talking about maternity leave and stuff like that, they know that there are certain things they don't really have to give to contractors. They only give those to employees. And workers for BPO sectors are not really treated as employees. They're treated as contractors. That's what we need to talk about. Turning contract workers into actual employees in situations where they're working at times as employees. We have to talk about providing better jobs than just BPO and tourism. So when the next part now is when the JLP's response is crediting the BPO sector and tourism for the provision of jobs without talking about quality of jobs and without looking at developing the economy, a proper vision of the economy and the future, where those are not the type of jobs that people have to rely on. Upskilling the workforce in general and stuff like that. Like, we need to move away from relying on BPOs and tourism. And that's not what we're hearing. We're hearing as if they have some strong ties to these sectors and the loyalty is more to these sectors than the workers. That was my take on it, at least, and people in lands feel similarly.
Having heard all of that, Sunil, and everything leading up to now, for the overall debate, who for you was the best debater and who was the worst?
On the PNP side, I think Raymond and Damian were really good. So
Overall, best debater overall.
Overall, I would say Raymond.
Raymond.
It's very close between Damian and Raymond. I'd give it just a slim edge to Raymond.
Worst?
Worst, for me, was Pernell Charles Jr.
For you, Christoph?
I would actually, the best, and it would surprise a lot of people that I'll say this, is Camino Johnson-Smith. The worst tonight for me was Raymond Price.
The best debater tonight for me was Raymond Price, and just for the closing element of it, the storytelling he gave, I thought the voters who he was speaking to would be agreeing with his final comments. I think the worst debater tonight has to be Pernell Charles Jr. Yeah.
I agree with Christoph on Camino Johnson-Smith being the best debater, and I identify Matthew Simoda as the worst one.
So for you, Camina, best debater, and worst debater for you is?
Matthew Simoda.
Explain.
Boy, I really was upset about the comment about Trelawney and the beaches. And everybody on the North Coast should. Everybody in a parish that has a notable coastline should be upset about that.
So he's the worst debater because of one answer.
Not that, but his pattern of noting opposition failures at inopportune times. When he was asked about the 300% increase done by his government and to give response to that, he found that as the best time to mention opposition critique. When we're talking about beach access and the fact that plainly the government has failed to protect the environment in a solid way, instead of actually critiquing what Ms. Fraser-Binns had to say and her policies, he had to talk about what opposition previously did. Those are really bad times to talk about opposition failures instead of addressing what the government should have been doing.
Okay. So before we go into speaking about who won and who lost, let's go by the rubric from the Jamaica Debates Commission. And let's start by going to the issues. Content, were your personal issues addressed? Starting with you, Matthew.
Well, the three most important issues I had were constitutional and legal reform, housing and education. Legal reform wasn't touched with a long stick in this debate. I don't think either party wanted to have done that. I think we did hear about housing and education, though.
On each side, speak about how each side, where your issues addressed on each side, by the PNP, by the JLP.
I think education is sort of an anomaly for both parties. I don't think either party has a really comprehensive education plan. Hearing their plans for education, you don't think they have a clear...
Okay. Who won the debate for you?
Overall? This is really tight, but I think it is the PNP for this reason. I think the JLP did not take out enough time to build out their plan for the future. You can tell that this is the exact point on the campaign trail that the 9 years having been so good doesn't work anymore. And the fact that they didn't have a manifesto really showed in this debate tonight.
Corv da Costa.
Best
winner.
The winner is clearly the PNP, and I believe it's the PNP because they've used the time in opposition to create, in their eyes, a clear vision for the future, and I don't think the government came tonight with what where they wanted to take us. I didn't see that, and I think the PNP had a clear vision. On most of the issues, from transportation right back to beach access, I think those are the issues they're talking about on the campaign trail.
Christoph?
Can't identify one, to be honest. Was disappointed by both, and even if I go by the issues that I care about, I could say what I heard and what I didn't hear from each party on each issue.
So no winner for it, it's a draw?
Yeah, it's not a case of both winning, it's a case of both losing, but yes, it will be that.
Not even the case of choosing the worst of two, the best of two evils?
No, I've never been a fan of doing that, you know, even in elections and talking about voting and that, choosing the lesser of two evils.
You could not identify a clear winner from this debate?
No, because, and I mean, if you don't know, I can go by the actual issues and what I was looking out for.
Sorry, because I'm out of time. For you, Sunil?
For me, very quickly, it was the PNP. I think that they were more prepared. They looked more synergized. They had more direct responses to questions that were asked. And I think that their responses gave me more clarity than the JLP's team.
All right. So that's all the time we have for our post-debate analysis. From my count, 3 of my guests say the PNP won. One of my guests, Christoph, said that both of them lost. I've never heard that response yet to a debate. But that's all the time we have. Of course, tomorrow you can catch all the recap in CVM's News at 7 to the first of the 3 national debates. Of course, the second debate on the economy will be on Tuesday, and that for the first time will be a team debate, and then the leadership debate on Thursday between Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness will be going up against the leader of the opposition, Mark Gooding. Of course, I will be one of the questioners from CVM television for that debate, so you do not want to miss it. And of course, we will have live coverage of all the debates, and our pre-show on Tuesday and Thursday will begin at 8:30. So stick and stay to CVM TV for your coverage of Decision 2025